And in that vein, we saw what happened at NBC News with the former head of the RNC. I'm not a particularly big fan of hers, but that's not the point. And you see what happens with the media all the time. They will grab anyone and promote anything. Michael Avenatti, I think they were pushing for president at one point. The Russia collusion lie that went on for 2 years on MSNBC and CNN, particularly with Rachel Maddow. The constant pushing on racism and bigotry and anti-Semitism, it's all a reflection of the Democrat Party. The reason why McDaniel couldn't join NBC is because NBC and MSNBC are ideological Democrat Party operations. It's that simple, like most of the media. I wrote about this in Unfreedom of the Press. No longer is the objective to try and be objective or impartial, an impossibility, but still, that's the goal. We always knew Walter Cronkite was liberal, but we also knew he tried to conceal it. Same with most of the other great network anchors and hosts. Not anymore. This is the 1960 generation, and it is their children. And they exist to promote an agenda, to promote a worldview, to re-engineer our society, and you and I stand in the way. And you and I, being 70% of the American people, maybe more, who love the country, but that's not who they play to. They play to the river to the sea crowd. They play to the Marxists. They play to the extremists in our society who are trying to destroy our country. Is this an accident? No, it's not an accident. The Democrat Party, as I've explained now, is a totalitarian party. And the Constitution was written to limit the power of any one entity, any faction, even a party. It was written to prevent the centralization of government. In other words, it was written to protect us from the Democrat Party. As I wrote some time ago, a democracy or republic consisting of multiple political parties competing for power is simply unacceptable to and incompatible with this American Marxist ideology of any form or in any country, including the United States. Yet that is the unmistakable goal of the Democrat Party. The late philosopher Raymond Aron explained the party structure in America and other Western countries is based on the legality of opposition. So when you're trying to put your political opponent in prison, that's a telltale sign that something's going wrong. It's a constitutionally based peaceful rivalry. The legal exercise of power, the temporary exercise of power, and the legitimate method of exercising power. Importantly, he adds, the opposition accepts decisions which are taken legally by the government in power or the majority, but if a time comes when these decisions endanger its most vital interests, its very existence, will they not try to resist, he asks? There are circumstances in which a minority chooses to fight rather than submit. The smooth functioning of a Western regime depends then essentially on what the competing parties propose to do. The fundamental problem of Western democracy, that is the combination of national understanding and contestation, is easy or difficult to resolve according to the nature of the parties, the aims which they set themselves, and the doctrines which they preach. You see where I'm going? Democrat Party doesn't want any other party. That's why it's changing our election laws. That's why it tries to impeach Republican presidents. It tried to take out Reagan, tried to prevent George W. Bush from ascending to the presidency. It went after Donald Trump on day one and never has stopped because they knew he would run for re-election. Aron writes, when a party, one party alone, has the monopoly of political activity, the state is indissolubly linked to it. And I point out, in the United States, it can now be said that the monopoly party is the Democrat Party. Indeed, the vast administrative state, built mostly, albeit not exclusively, by the Democrat Party, issues edicts, dictates, regulations, rules, fines, penalties that serve the ideological purposes of the Democrat Party, whether the Democrat Party is in power or not. Aron describes it this way. In a one-party regime, the state is the party state, inseparable from the party, which monopolizes legitimate political activity. If instead of a state of parties, a party state exists, the state will be obliged to restrict freedom of political discussion. And you've seen that with the disinformation, the use of the social platforms, the censorship efforts of Biden and the Democrat Party. We're the state party, and the media is part of the state party. They don't want any discussion. They don't want any of it. Since the state presupposes as absolutely valid the ideology of the monopolistic party, it cannot officially allow this ideology to be called into question. In fact, the restriction on freedom of political discussion varies in degree according to the regimes of a single party. But the essence of a single-party regime in which the state is defined by the ideology of the monopolistic party, the Democrat Party, is not to accept all the ideas and to prevent some ideas relating to the party from being openly debated. And this is where the Democrat Party, I argue, has driven the nation. The power and control of the Democrat Party and the allegiance to it and to its ideology above all else are the objective. This is evident in the media, social sites, entertainment, and academia. And if that's not enough, it gets worse. The Democrat Party has become the political and operational organism through which the American Marxism functions. Just as early in our history, it was the party of the Confederacy and slavery, segregation, and the Ku Klux Klan and Jim Crow. In more recent times, it has adapted the tailored Marxist ideology to American governance and politics, and in so doing, the Democrat Party has adopted what some call a passive or quiet revolution approach. As the late Italian communist Antonio Gramsci argued, a long march through America's cultural institutions, where intellectuals, broadly defined, would populate these institutions, slowly but surely radicalize them, soften existing social morals, and ultimately destroy the culture and restructure society. Indeed, Gramsci asserted socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the New Order, he said, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media, by transforming the consciousness of society. Although Gramsci urged subterfuge and deceit, and we see it all around us, he did not oppose force or violence employed strategically and wisely. Saul Alinsky, a Marxist and Gramsci fan, wrote Rules for Radicals, as you know. Based essentially on Gramsci's approach, Alinsky was a mentor to Hillary Clinton, who in 1969 wrote her 92-page senior thesis on Alinsky at Wellesley College. And his writings were extremely influential with a young community activist, Barack Obama. Obviously, these are two of the most prominent Democrat Party leaders in the last 30 years. Another leading influence in the Democrat Party is, of course, Bernie Sanders. Despite more recent efforts to mainstream him, Sanders, who nearly won the Democrat nomination for president in 2020 and whose issue papers have served as the revolutionary blueprint for the Biden administration, has spent his entire life as a Marxist activist. Although he's treated as a kind of elderly statesman of the Democrat Party, his record in Marxist movements and activities and in support of repressive communist regimes and causes is extensive. Sanders has praised genocidal communist regimes in the old Soviet Union, Cuba, Nicaragua, and he's called for the government takeover of most of our industries and offered a 21st century economic Bill of Rights that could have been lifted straight from Joseph Stalin's 1936 Soviet Constitution. The Democrat Party is the state party in America. It's supported by a state media that poses as a free press. You just saw that. The state media are no less devious and diabolical than the party they promote, and like other propagandists, they are skilled at deceit and deception on behalf of the cause. This is very, very important to understand because you now have a fusion of the Democrat Party, the administrative state, the media, and Hollywood. We're surrounded by it. The great George Orwell, you may remember him. He wrote some great books, Animal Farm, and he wrote 1984. Orwell explains, it is almost universally felt that when we call a country democratic, we are praising it. Consequently, the defenders of every kind of regime claim that it is a democracy and fear that they might have to stop using the word if it were tied down to any one meaning. In other words, democracy, the word, is used to conceal tyranny. We see it, China, Russia, other parts, the People's Republic, that sort of thing. The person who uses them has his own private definition, but allows his hearer to think he means something quite different. So simply put, the abuser of words is a demagogue who is knowingly lying by creating a false narrative. I'll give you a few examples with Joe Biden. Joe Biden is accusing Donald Trump of wanting to destroy Social Security and Medicare. In 1984, in 1987, in 2007, and 2009, as a senator and beyond, as a candidate, Joe Biden has called for either the slashing of spending in Social Security, Medicare, and the Veterans Administration, freezing spending, or a complete overhaul of those programs. Today, he says he has no plan to do anything, and he says it's Trump. I researched this. Trump never said any such thing, ever, ever. And now he's accusing Trump of doing it because he's a liar, he's a propagandist, and he uses the American Marxist playbook, and the media are all with him. Joe Biden says that it's Donald Trump and the Republicans who won't secure the border because they won't pass some imbecilic law that they threw out there, and they threw it out there for cover. Bipartisan, yeah, 3 Republicans supported it out of all of them. And yet we know, as a matter of fact, part of Donald Trump's public career has been about securing the southern border. And it was mostly secured under Donald Trump. So they flip it. They project onto somebody else their own failures and so forth. Joe Biden goes around and he says that he cut $1.7 trillion from the budget when he's created the biggest deficit and debts in world history, to the point where this economy could collapse. Well, what's he talking about? Well, the COVID spending had a deadline. And so $1.7 trillion was dropped, or that amount, because it wasn't renewed. That's not him cutting the debt by $1.7 trillion. And others have looked at that and said, quite the contrary. He has massively increased the debt. And I could go on and on and on. You see, he's an expert at this, Joe Biden, because he's been around so long, he'll do whatever it takes. So now, full circle. You saw what happened to Ronna McDaniel at NBC. This is happening in virtually every news operation in America except this one and a few others. You see how they are mouthpieces for the Democrat Party. You see how they are mouthpieces for this radical extremist agenda. Open borders, redistributing wealth, socialism over capitalism, Hamas over Israel, on and on and on. The media, the Democrat Party, the administrative state, the comics, the movies, all of it, one and the same. Gramsci has succeeded. They are devouring our country, and they're doing it through the elites and the ruling class. Because the funny thing is, the vast majority of the American people want none of this. And then your next question is, why do they vote for it? I don't know. Why do people vote in all kinds of horrendous regimes and then only regret it after the fact? Propaganda, demagoguery, the big lie, repetition, a corrupt media. People want to believe. People want to believe in things, and they don't want to believe that in the United States of America, that the Democrat Party is totalitarian and that it's promoting tyranny.